is our mental capacity? How do we think about moving to a company to the next level?
Well, our first is our psychology, or what I call your inner game. Your inner game must be strong enough to support the actions required to get that result desired. And what happens is we normally just map out a plan and we say, okay, here's what I want, and so here's all the action steps I need to take. But what we don't take into consideration is our psychology. One of my friends, Wesley Gu, he makes a great statement. He says, Nike made a fortune on the fact of just do it. But what they don't take into consideration is that sometimes you just don't feel like it.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So it's one of those things. It's like, which came first? The chicken or the egg principle, but the real bottom line is that our psychology, our inner game, has to be strong enough to support the actions that are required to get the result desired, or it never will happen. And I get asked all the time, Bob, well, how do I know what my psychology will support? And I go, it supports exactly what you're doing right now and nothing more, or you would be doing more. And so it's really that simple. But then how do we create a psychology that will support those actions?
Exactly.
That's a whole nother piece.
Yeah. I know that the psychology has to go with the behavior. That's what you just said. And I love the example that you were using a little earlier. Would you share that with us about sales calls?
About sales calls, yeah. If you need to make 20 more sales calls in a day, and you say, okay, I know that my ratio to calls is just not there, so I need to make 20 more sales calls. That's great. You know exactly what to do. But how many other things do you know exactly what to do? Do you know how to lose weight? Do you know how to make more money? Do you know how to be more loving? Yes, we all know those things. Yes. Why don't we do it? It's because our psychology doesn't support it. So I'll give you a perfect example. Somebody will say, Bob, I don't know what to do about making 20 more sales calls. And I said, well, if I told you this, that if you don't make 20 more sales calls, a loved one, a very loved, near and dear one to you, is going to die. What's the likelihood you'll make the 20 sales calls?
You'll do it.
Every time, right? How many days will you miss?
I do it.
Right. How many days will you miss? None, right? Why?
Right.
Because your psychology now supports making those sales calls. So sometimes we can't create that kind of sense of urgency, but it boils down to the reason we don't do something is because we haven't created a sense of urgency about it.
So that's why when people are to the bottom of their bucket, then suddenly there's a sense of urgency and they start to pull themselves out of it.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly who said it, but I love it, and I attribute it to Tony Robbins because he says a lot of great things about this. But the principle is that it's not about our resources, it's about our ability to be resourceful. And so, really most people say, Bob, I don't know how to do it. And I go, well, if your child's life was in danger, would you figure it out? Yes. Then it truly isn't about your resources. It's about your ability to be resourceful. Bob, I can't be on time. Really? If I was going to pay you $5,000 to be on time, would you be on time? Yes. Then it wasn't about that you were running late, that you didn't leave early enough. It was that it wasn't important enough for you to be on time. Ooh. We need to learn how to create resourcefulness with people, not just helping them get better resources. Resourcefulness will trump resources every time.
Wow, so that must be why people take class after class after class after class after class, and then nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
And they think that somebody else hasn't given them the answer.
Right. And I love those people that come back and say, well, I took this class and it didn't work. And I said, well, bathing is kind of like that too, right? You only take it once, or do you take a bath every day? Right? It's a constant and never-ending improvement. And so we constantly have to be looking at, how do I become the absolute best version of myself? And one of the questions we can ask ourselves is, how would the absolute best version of me show up in that situation? In that situation, in that networking event, in that sales presentation, online, how would the best version of me show up? And then act that way. So that becomes, again, my psychology is, the best version of me would show up differently than the version that's just normally showing up. It really boils down to changing our behavior and our patterns. So when patterns collide with willpower, patterns win almost every time. So what we have to do is not just change the willpower. I'm going to get them to go to the gym tomorrow. I'm going to the gym. Yeah. How often do we do that? And then we don't go. Why? Because we're trying to trump a pattern with willpower. And so we have to understand that willpower is going to fall short all the time to patterns. So what we have to do is change the patterns. Yeah. And it's not just our mindset, because mindset's the way we think, but it's really about our psychology, what inner game. It's that piece that everything that you've ever experienced in your entire life, Barbara, every piece that you've ever experienced, everything good, bad, and indifferent, that has made you who you are today. And so it's that. Everything that makes you up who you are today is your inner game. Okay. That doesn't always change the way you think, but it certainly changes the way that you feel and believe and everything else. And that's where your inner game really needs to start changing, so you can change the patterns.